Hello, everybody, and welcome to this discussion of unlocking the secrets of the chop and the lift, exercises that are so versatile and that so many of us probably use within our business model, whether you're in the clinic or you're in the fitness industry. But guess what? Maybe there's some little nuances we're not really picking up on the value of these exercises, the chop and the lift. We're here today to spend some time with Gray Cook to really unlock those secrets so that we can use those exercises a little bit more targeted and get more benefit from them. Again, whether you're in the rehab setting or in that fitness setting. My name is Michelle Desser. I'm the Director of Education at Functional Movement Systems, and I will be here today to help navigate any questions that you might have, both answering them within the chat as well as sending some to Gray at the conclusion of this demonstration. So please don't hesitate to ask us your questions. We love your questions. That's why we're here right now. So please take advantage that you have us right now and you can ask us what you'd like. So without further ado, I'm going to send it over to Gray Cook to lead us into the demonstration of unlocking the power of that chop and lift.
Hey guys, listen, if you tuned in a little bit before this, you saw me already talking about the chop and lift in one of our archive videos. My model in that video was actually my wife Danielle, and that was almost 20 years ago. We're still talking about the same patterns and doing them. But I find in my own mind and in some of the people I work with, we get stuck in one paradigm of using the chop and lift for functional training. We only use it for corrective patterns, or we only use it in rehab. And I want to show you today the full spectrum of how we use these natural spiral and diagonal patterns to actually create better stability downstairs and maybe better timing, control, coordination, and mobility upstairs. And so I hope today I'm able, like Michelle said, to touch on maybe a part of the chop and lift that isn't part of your toolbox and could easily be if we just sort of think outside that normal strength conditioning paradigm. Now, the chop and lift are natural spiral and diagonal movements that I learned a lot about in PT school and PNF. And one of the books that I looked at was a book by Voss. It was PNF patterns, spiral and diagonal patterns. We've got a cover shot of that book right there. But what I want you to see in that move is as we come down and across the body, we're not just doing a sort of sweep movement. We're doing a pull to the center of us and a push through. We're doing a pull back to the center of us and a push through. So I see a lot of people doing these diagonal patterns, but they look sort of robotic. And even though I might use a challenge as a test, when we're getting into those spiral and diagonal movements, they should be a pull to center and a push away, or a pull to center and a push away to really fit the natural, I think, challenge of that benefit. As I got out of PT school and my strength conditioning training and started going into a lot of sports, tennis and golf, I tapped back into that because I wasn't just using PNF patterns for rehab. I started using it for functional training. And when I started working with a young group of junior tennis players, what we realized is we were able to significantly change their grip strength in a single season without ever working on their grip, simply doing, once again, the spiral and diagonal patterns. When I started working with Lee Burton and the team at Functional Movement Systems in our original clinic, Lee and I got together and wrote a book for the NSCA journal, Functional Training for the Torso. The reason we didn't call it the core then is because nobody was talking about the core then. But I saw how a lot of people were training the lower body, a lot of people were training the upper body, but really connecting the two needs a lot more than crunches and planks. And I think chops and lifts will give that to us. So when I wrote my first book, Athletic Body and Balance, you're going to see it again. Challenges to the chop and lift were all through that book, and it's what I consider a cornerstone of functional training. One more book I'm going to talk about is I got a call from a guy who's way more famous than me, Tim Ferriss. He wrote a book called The 4-Hour Body. And Tim wanted me to challenge him with 4 functional exercises that would clean up his screen, even if I didn't know what his movement screen was. I gave him the chop, the lift, the Turkish get up, and a single leg deadlift. And I stand by that today. And Tim unpacks that in the longest chapter in that book of our little journey, and we never once met. He was in South Africa running through the moves. I was sending him videos, and we were having calls in the process. So without further ado, I want to take you through a journey of a low-level chop and lift, transitional level chop and lift, and functional training chop and lift, And Danielle's going to help me do that. Guys, this is my wife, Danielle Cook. If you'll just lay down, not quite as far as the logo right there. Now, as you guys can see, Danielle's just in a supine position, and I would like you guys to think about all the patients that we may work with in rehab who've had abdominal surgeries, neck problems. It's obvious that we could help people here with the shoulder, but I think sometimes we underutilize these patterns when we're working with neck patients or people who've had a hernia surgery, C-section, low back pain. So this is a very low-level position, but I don't just grab these bands and make people do exercises. I'm going to basically get Danielle with this stick in a comfortable leverage pattern, and I'm going to have you just hold that stick, and I'm going to try to pull it one way or push it the other way. Don't let me move. And just take note of the difficulty that you have when I pull and push. Good. Now we're going to change the position, and I'm going to go this way. Pull, push. You feel stronger on one side? You do. This side? Okay, good. We're going to go back here, and all I'm going to say is, would you bridge up for me? And we're going to challenge again. That better? Okay, what we just learned there is just by getting her glutes involved on this side, it feels more similar to the other side. She's already naturally stabilizing a little bit better here, not so much here. Now Danielle is completely aware of why we're doing the chop and lift and what it's supposed to deliver for us. So I could give her a band and we could start working right away. But in this mid-range, we're just really working with her strength. If I take her all the way to there and say, don't let me pull you out of there, that's that in-range stability. And a lot of times we fail to consider that. And to me, that's a much better signature of stability sometimes than that mid-range challenge. So I challenge her both ways. Now hold right here, don't let me take you out of there. Good. All right, bridge. Way better. It's that little bit of mushiness we feel on that end that indicates stability or not. And so now we've got a perfect paradigm to start showing her chops when she's exercising. So, and I want you to finish right about here. Don't wrap it around your body, but straight down and across right there. Good, and back. Now bridge and see if that's helpful.
Definitely.
Good, so what I'm going to have her do is unbridge. Okay, bridge first, set stability, go ahead and bridge. Now chop, now unchop, unbridge. So I went there from a challenge test of midline strength to a little activation technique that she has. Now, if she's a neck patient and I don't want her to say bridge up and flex her neck at all I do is put an AirX pad under her T-spine and she won't flex her neck as much. But the other thing I'm looking for is how much neck are you using here? We see a lot of people do chops and lifts and the minute they start, every neck muscle just bulges out. I tell them to bridge and relax their neck and all of a sudden they stabilize from the bottom up, not the top down. Now, we can also do a challenge with a lifting pattern the exact same way. So I'm going to have you lift here, okay? All right, knuckle to knuckle, right there. There you go. There you go. Now, and take it and press it out. That gets hard right there. See if a bridge helps that at all. And press it through. Good. So once again, we got a bit of a teaching moment here. And so instead of just assigning chops and lifts and walking away, I really like to do this challenge and help her see how maybe bridging. And then what I want you to do on one more chop here is do one pattern without a bridge. Go ahead and chop down and across. Good. And come back and now bridge. Come back. If it's more stable with a bridge, come back out of the bridge, but remember how you stabilized. And one of the ways I told her to do this is, listen, you're not just laying on your back. You've got some feet here. So stabilize from the feet up, but don't bridge this time and see if you get some of the same benefit. Yes. There you go. So I want you guys to use these challenges, not just to develop the obliques or the arms or something like that, but to truly help people appreciate a left-right asymmetry, and many times we'll see everything to the left, whether it's a chop or lift, is weak. or we'll find a single quadrant. And that's why I want you guys, when you look at this overhead, we've got this nice mat table. It really keeps us remembering these spiral and diagonal lines. I have a few pet peeves, and one is a flat chop or lift. It's when people want to do chops and lifts like this, it really doesn't fit the anatomical advantage we have. And one of the things we learn in PNF is the spiral and diagonal orientation of the muscles, the fascia, and the movement patterns do not fit straight plane movement at all. They fit these spiral and diagonal leverage advantages, and we want to exploit those when we're doing this. Now, I don't often see people do a lot of chops and lifts in a quadruped pattern, but as we're developing from a supported spine to what I call a suspended spine, if I could get you on all fours, head facing this way, I want to show how we can get some of the same benefits of that chop and lift here. Now come on out a little bit further because I might have you extend the leg in a minute, but why don't you grab that with this hand?
Oh, sorry.
Yep. And what I'm going to have you do is the same movement, but with one hand, just chop through, and I want you to sort of wind up right over here, okay? So pull through and chop. Now, see how you looked on the outside of your arm? I want you to follow that hand and look on the inside of your arm. And pull through. Perfect. Come back up. What's one thing she can learn from here? Well, if you extend the leg on that side, okay, go ahead, and pull through now. Easier or harder? About the same? A lot of people will go into a quadruped diagonal, and actually it's easier because by shifting the weight, they had to force stabilization from the bottom up, once again, not from the top down. So when you find poor rolling patterns, consider chops and lifts from a supine, bridged, or hook line position. And when you are in quadruped working on stability here, realize you don't just have to bang out a bunch of bird dogs. We can get after it and start doing that flexion extension pattern. So once again, pull down through and come back up. See if lifting the leg gives an advantage. Good. Now, just to demonstrate, I'm going to show a lift pattern with this hand from the same one. So let's come to the start position right here and press that thing out. Good. Now, I'm going to get on you. That was what I would call a horizontal, more of a flat angle. So I want you to get way more vertical. And what I'm coaching her in, guys, is I don't want her out here. I want it right there. So let's press that out and put it way higher in the room. Higher, 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 higher. Closer to your head. Right there. Okay. And come back down one more time. Put it right back where we had it. That more vertical orientation is way more anatomically correct, a lot more lower trap, a lot better retraction. Now, let's get the other leg up and see if that gives you an advantage. And it actually forces, just like a bridge, stability from the bottom up when we use that quadruped position. So in rehab, sometimes I don't think we exploit the power of the chop and lift to help our people with back problems, abdominal surgeries, core problems, and even neck problems. So one of the things I'm looking for when I give her that lower body activation is less neck, more stability, and these are some of the best patterns in the world to get it. Now, if I could just have you come from this position right up to tall kneeling, I just want you to chop down and across. Perfect. And the way I've got it, it's almost feeling like Danielle needs to chop and come around her body. But since I've got the pull behind her, she's going to finish way up front. So finish up front, but bend those elbows. Remember, don't just sweep it. It's a pull to a push. So pull to your chest. Good. Tricep press it out. It's got to look a lot more like that. When she pushes to the front of her body, she's biasing anterior, okay? But she could also be chopping from this direction, pulling all the way down and back, biasing the back side of her body. Try the other side. and wind up in front of you. There you go. And keep that down. So when you finish, you know you've done the pattern good when the bands and the arms line up. And see that lineup we've got? From any angle you look at it, we've got that line. Finish at that same spot every time, right here at the end of the stick. Good. Don't lose your balance and work it out. Now, people often confuse which leg goes up here. Well, if we go ahead and bring this leg up in a half kneeling chop and lift, okay, we're going to come right across the top of that thigh and finish where the other knee would be if they were both up, and come back down. And I've often heard people say, like, would you ever do it to the other side? There's really no anatomical reason to do it. If she were being asked to stand from a lunge position and you could use your upper body to help, that's exactly what you do. So stand on up. A chop and a lunge blend together in that. So that natural orientation. When we're half kneeling, we can find out a lot. And when I'm seeing people in the FMS that have ones on stuff like hurdle step and lunge, they don't like one of these positions. So in one position, they're going to be a lot more stable than the other. And a half kneeling chop or lift really exposes that. So whether she's doing Indian clubs in this position, doing med ball slams in this position, or we're basically doing a chop with a stick or bands in this position, she's going to get a lot. Now, she's got the band. She's going to be doing the chop. Now, I'm going to show you some of the things that are overlooked when people are coaching a half kneeling chop or lift. Go ahead and do about 3. And you can see how wide her base is. She's got about an 8-inch wide base. And the first thing I'm going to do is say narrow that base by bringing that foot right in line with the stick. And remember, it's a pull to a push. So bring it to you and then tricep press it out. There you go. Now, as I remove this stick, I'm really going to make it hard for her because most people want to go up in resistance. I don't. I want to go into a more challenging base. So let's put that foot right where the stick was and come in a little bit more. And perfect. So way more challenge of that lower body posture than upper body pattern. It's not just about how hard we make it. Let's do the half kneeling on the other side and see if you're noticing a left-right difference. Same pull to push. She naturally starts with that same wide base. Keep it close to, there you go. Finish right there. Now, narrow up to where the stick is. Good. Having fun yet?
Yes.
All right. And narrow it just about an inch or two more. And what you're going to start to see is people will start to lean on the band. They'll be very, very challenged. So I'm going to give you one cue here because we can't bridge and we can't do a bird dog, but we can be tall. So get taller right here. Equalize your weight between the front and back. Much better, okay? So people are going to do everything in the world to execute the pattern and they'll give up their posture. She'll slouch, that knee will get wobbly, or without even realizing it, she'll grab a much wider base. So everybody else is looking at the pattern. I'm looking at what it does to the base. I'm looking at what it does to the spine. I'm looking at what it does to the neck. And remember, these are natural movements that happen with the upper body. These are movements that we see in growth and development and as babies are sort of doing a feeding pattern or a protection pattern of their body. So these are very primal movements. So using these with a little bit of resistance to cause poor decision making in your base or poor use of your neck are exactly what I'm using them for. And then I have a breath cue to coach it out or some other type of body posture cue to coach it out. Okay. Now, if you will help me, we're going to take the mat and keep the mat on the floor and get these boxes out of the way. So if you'll get those boxes, I got the mat. Perfect. And I want this just so you guys can see that I'm always trying to work with those angles as best I can. But I often hear a lot of people say, I'd love to use half kneeling chops in lifts with my population, but I have people who have a difficult time kneeling. So I'm going to get you right here and kneeling like that. grab your bands. Now, number one, she doesn't have to go as low to do this. So I found a lot of people that I can sort of bolster up like this, but I'm still mostly getting the challenge to the left hip. This kickstand is still here, but they don't have to go as low. So this is a great option for some people who don't feel comfortable kneeling, but we need to progress them from supine, quadruped. So a couple of chops right here. And don't lean into it. Stay tall the whole time. Stay tall the whole time. Perfect. All right. Now, I'm going to show one more thing is we're going to go tall kneeling with the same move. So knees right here, feet on the downhill side. Both knees. Yep. And come on up to the top. Now, if you look, she's in tall kneeling, and I'm going to have you press right out here. That's way easier on the quads, but I can actually reverse this. So if you see what the wedge is doing, it's not putting any tension on her quads at all. But if I have the typical athlete and I'm really trying to challenge core training and quad dominance, and I know somebody who's got a little quad dominance, switch with me real quick and let me turn this around. I think it will be best demonstrated to everybody if you're this way. So hook your feet over the edge, bring your knees downhill. Yep, let go of that one. There you go. Now, it's going to be hard to be tall here. See how I'm forcing her into hip flexion? Be really tall. Quads are on a little bit of a stretch now, but there's no reason for them to be. So just down and across and finish behind you this time, but don't twist your hips. Stay tall. Good. And so I've challenged her quads downhill on the wedge, and she's really having to use her core, and her quads are no advantage now. They're on a stretch. So these are options if you've got a wedge you can use as well. Okay? All right. Now, lastly, if you stand on the diagonal, this is pretty much a chop right across the body. But if you stand on the flat, this is a chop out in front of the body. This is going to challenge almost everything a plank's going to challenge. But if I come to this diagonal, that's a chop that's pretty much really getting into this back hip and line. So what I'm going to have you do is use each line. We're going to do this one first. This is sort of a neutral chop, halfway across the body, okay? This is a anterior bias chop because if I got weak here, I would hyperextend. So when you have athletes that are prone to hyperextension, to back injuries that are going into hyperextension, you bias, not here, you bias finish the chop out front, whereas finish the chop behind. So I want you to try each of those lines. First of all, in this diagonal, just down and across the body, and come on out a little bit. That way you start at a taller position. So come out this way. And see how I really want her to start with a little more resistance up here? Down and across the body, keep it close. All right, good. About 3. All right, now get on the straight line, facing directly forward, but you're going to finish out in front. Good. Now get on the other diagonal, face this way, but my hand's in the same place, finish behind. So she had no problem with the ab challenge, but this puts you way into your hips. So I want you guys to see this as a 3D challenge, and having those grids on the floor really help us put some tape down, do something. But a chop or a lift is a much better challenge. We could do a bunch of lifts the same way, but that's sort of where we're going with the chop and lift. So people asked, where do I go next? We did a lot of chop and lift patterns in our Indian Club video, and in Athletic Body and Balance, I also showed from a half kneeling or tall kneeling position, we can do a med ball throw and watch that medicine ball bounce. How do I get engagement there? Well, most of the med balls we get from Perform Better, because everything I'm working with today I got from Perform Better. They give me the stall bars, the cook bands, everything, and that's sort of my functional corner. That's where I work this stuff out. But once I find the quadrant of the chopper lift I'm working on, I can bring Indian clubs, med balls, sandbags, all that stuff to it and sort of really use these patterns a lot better. I see these patterns cleaning up people's Turkish getup. I see them cleaning up somebody's golf game or tennis game. But don't just blindly train these things. Look for the quadrant where they got a shaky base, where they got a really tense neck, where they got a lot of difficulty. And instead of just lightening or tensioning tubing, start doing some of the cues that I've given Danielle today about adding a bridge, adding a diagonal, narrowing the base, or being tall. And I think you'll get a lot more out of the chop and lift station. But you can progress somebody from some very low level stuff to high end stuff. When we're bouncing the med ball, the first thing I do is let a little bit of air out of a med ball that will bounce. And I'll keep it sort of light, under about 6 pounds. I want them to bounce as violently as they can, as close to their body as they can. And what we get is a representation of power, because that ball's going to bounce. And if I'm standing right there, it'll bounce about head high to me. I always start them on their good patterns. So then when we go to their difficult pattern, they are just discombobulated. They don't know what to do here. And the one thing we're getting ready to see is a very inferior bounce right there. Now here's what happens. If they apply the same things about tall spine and stability, you'll start seeing the ball go higher and higher and bounce every time. So at the highest end with athletes or power athletes, the chop and lift position, the half kneeling position, break them down and help us see weaknesses in their core where they can't transfer energy from bottom to top or top back down. So Michelle, I'm sure we've got some questions, and I'm sure Danielle wants to take a rest break, but fire away, guys. I hope we covered a lot of stuff in a little amount of time, and we've got some resources for you on the website, but fire away with the questions if you got them.
Thanks, Gray. Well, wow, that was just a really informative demonstration right there. In fact, actually, Gray, I know you're going to love to hear this. I actually can't wait to start trying some of those quadruped positions with some of my clients as well as myself. Hadn't thought of some of those, so I really enjoy some of those variations right there. We definitely got some great questions that came in, and we truly appreciate the opportunity that you all took from your days to be here with us. So, Gray, we do have some questions for you. I'm going to send your way. That first question is going to be, what are your suggestions or recommendations using a resistance band versus maybe a cable column machine or a Kaiser machine?
Okay. In athletic body and balance, I had a free motion machine and a bar and obviously a cable. So when I'm in clinic, if I've got Kaiser or a weight stack, I love using that because it's selectorized, I can adjust it. And with a band, we all know the resistance is light at the top, heavy at the bottom. Not ideal when I have better equipment in the clinic, but totally ideal when my athletes are traveling. When I first came up with the Cook band, I was working with one of my classmates at University of Miami, Jill Gressley, who was following the Women's Tennis Association as a physical therapist. They needed places to work out internationally, and the hotel gym looks different every time you change hotels. But they could get consistencies on chops and lifts and lunges in a hotel room or off the fence in tennis. So we wanted a multi-use band that would be really friendly for home use and very portable and able to travel. But in clinic, if I've got a Kaiser machine or a free motion, I can show a lot of this. The only time that I'm always using bands is the way we had this set up in the very beginning with the mat table and the stall bars has been part of every clinic I've ever designed. I have a low-level station, whether I'm working with an ACL athlete that's non-weight bearing right now, or whether I'm working with somebody that just got a total knee. I can start using those patterns right away. So if you've got an attachment point or a set of stall bars and you've got a mat table, that's where it starts, and that's where it's more convenient just to have the bands. But if I'm doing half kneeling or standing stuff, I go ahead and get after it with weights because I've got a consistent resistance and a range of motion all the way through.
Thanks, Gary. And another question that came in about the band in particular is anchor point. Where do we anchor that band for that chop and then lift? Behind the person, in line with the person? Just some feedback on that.
Okay. It's always best to go right in line. Treat it like a pane of glass at first. But you're working with somebody for a particular reason. You already know, are they an anterior pelvic tilt? Are they quad dominant? Do they have great abs and a weak back, or vice versa? So when I'm finishing with my chop behind me, I'm working everything that would help your deadlift. And when I'm finishing with it in front of me, I'm working on everything that would help your push-up, your plank, and your punch. When I'm working with it right across the body, I'm really just challenging your 3D stability. So when I see a great move here, and then I see a weak move here, I can just train that, or I can start biasing it and finishing out front, or finishing behind and really dial it in and find that really weak quadrant. So I think it's a safe bet to start off in that pane of glass right across the front of you. And remember, we don't sweep the movement, even though we see a lot of people doing a lot of stuff like this. I can actually get everything they're going for much more specific by getting on that one diagonal quadrant that's your weakest, and fixing that weakest link, and not just doing this random, rotation in either direction. So start with the pane of glass, but then when you're working for a particular reason, like this glute or that side of the abs, by biasing a front press or a rear press finish, same way with the lift, we can really dial it in and see some of those weak corners of their movement room. So.
Awesome. Thanks, great. Really appreciate that example right there that you just shared with us. Now, there is another question, talking about positioning of the front down leg in your half kneeling or your split stance positioning. The question that came in is, depending on athletic endeavors, and this individual suggested maybe grappling or sports in that nature, would it ever be an option to maybe chop towards that up knee, so towards that flex knee?
I probably wouldn't, but I understand where they're coming from. You can challenge somebody anywhere. And if we're just doing a half kneeling challenge, I'll challenge you anywhere. But there's going to be an interrupt right here. This is an unnatural pattern. We see people have to do it. In Olympic canoe racing, everything's done on this side, but the correction stroke is over here. But it's going to cause you to sacrifice your spine stability, because when we talk about half kneeling as a position, especially one for training, we don't have to fit every functional scenario, say a dancer, grappler, or gymnast would come into. I just need you to be rock solid on this side of the room and rock solid on that side of the room. And if somebody's rock solid and they ever have to go off of a stable base or go against what we call, this is a closed side rotation. My hip is up. By having my hip up, I've already flexed my lumbar a little bit on this side. So my rotation should always be worse to this side and always be freer to this side, because this hip is down. So for functional training purposes, you don't have to explore every position the sport's going to do, but definitely don't be weak down here. Don't be weak up here. Don't be weak down here. Don't be weak up here. Believe it or not, the brain will connect all those other nuance moves that MMA or dance or gymnastics could throw us into. But get the natural base first. The body knows what to do with the alternative.
Speaking of that natural base, Gray, do you have any cues that you look for with the pelvis? Are you looking for them to stay in a neutral position? Are you looking for any rotation from the pelvis? A couple questions came in regarding the pelvis position.
I forgot to do something, and I'm glad you asked that. Can I borrow you one more time? Get in the same half kneeling I was. I'm going to show you. I have a lot of people. I don't want to verbally coach Danielle to be stable here, but if I will let some air out of the ball and go ahead and just put your leg over top of that ball, be tall. Now, she knows she's stable in the pelvis and doesn't have to make adjustments. So if we're chopping across this way, or put your hands right here, don't let me push you up. Okay? Now she knows my pelvis feels stable. I feel rock solid on the base. Now, I'm going to take this away. So instead of telling her where to put her pelvis, it's already in the right place. Don't let me take you out of that. So it's more important to hold what you felt with the ball than it is to push me hard. Hold the ball first. The strength is the same. Now, default to what you'd normally be comfortable at. And I just break you right off of there. So I think that's an awesome question, but everybody hears what we say a little bit different. So what I do is give her a point of stability, a reference point for what good neutral pelvis feels like. Now, you're going to run into people that don't have good hip flexion, which is going to cause them to have a posterior pelvic tilt just to get in this position. That's where elevating the down knee gets them to 80 degrees or 70 degrees right here, and then all of a sudden the pelvis neutralizes. So if they've got a range of motion limitation, they can never have a normal pelvis here. Get them up off the floor a little bit, but don't completely negate half kneeling. However, if they just can't find a happy place here, start them at a happy place, train them, let them get comfortable and confident, take the happy place away and see if it's retained.
Awesome, thanks, Gray. Another question that came in is, instead of maybe using a resistance band or a cable column, what if you used a kettlebell or a free weight and you went through a combined pattern of chopping and lifting a continuous motion? What are your thoughts about that?
I want to give you one. The only time that I've really used a heavy resistance is imagine if I'm laying flat on my back like Danielle was. I can take a weight and bring it here and bring it to neutral, lower it there and bring it back, but I can't get the full pattern. And if I lifted a kettlebell in any direction other than absolutely vertical, it doesn't make a lot of sense with free weights. I know people do it, but it's really hard to justify. However, we've got an unbelievable momentum tool here, just like a med ball. A med ball, you let go of it. Indian clubs, you hold it. So we can actually get into these dynamic patterns with chopping and lifting, and I would much rather do a chop or lift pattern with Indian clubs or a med ball, save my kettlebell for a vertical Turkish get-up or an arm bar or something that would actually get me ready for this. But the chop and lift, if you go back to ancient reason why we use Indian clubs, this is for sword play. This is violence, and this has to go fast, not slow and controlled. So anytime we come off of the vertical where free weights work best and go into a diagonal, I need a momentum machine like this, or I need something that's not gravity dependent like a band.
Just a jam-packed, a session filled with just all these valuable tips on how to unlock the power of that chop and lift. We truly appreciate you sharing your expertise with us, because I think a lot of us, including myself, are going to take some of these tips and really start to affect change positively to our movement and the individuals that we work with. Now, I know a lot of questions that came in that said, hey, is this going to be able to be rewatched? And absolutely, this is going to be able to be available to you on this YouTube channel for a playback. So please go back in, rewatch, pick up all those cool little tips that Gray just shared with us right there. Now, before I sign off for us today, I do want to just send it back to Gray and just say, hey, any final tips for anybody who's watching with us today that you'd like to share?
Yeah, one tip. It's nice for you guys to try this. Go through your growing pains in a room by yourself with a spiral and diagonal patterns. You're going to make some mistakes right away. Because of the way media has sort of shown us these patterns, you're going to sweep the movements, not do a pull to a push. Keep it close to your body, because when we go up in weight, that's exactly what's getting ready to happen. You're supposed to keep your weight close to your body. Stay within your base of support. And even though you'll get more leverage out here, it's not better for you because it's not the natural way you would do something. Notice, I tested Danielle here, but when I got her to start training herself, we went more natural. It's almost like when we test a carry, we go heavy, but when we train a carry, we go light and we go 6 different positions. So I want you guys to really go through your growing pains, because if you can't find a weak quadrant in you from what I showed you today, it's going to be really hard for you to be confident finding that weak quadrant in somebody else. And once you do, Danielle and I started connecting up right away on her bridge gave her a competitive advantage. For once, she doesn't have to try harder. She just got to remember she can use her feet in both patterns, and she was only using them in one pattern. So I would try to get away from the verbal cueing as much as possible, other than teaching what you want, And I already found her weakness before we started exercising with that little challenge. So if you can, get with a partner and challenge each other some of the ways we did, and then train yourself in a chop and lift, I think your brain will know exactly which one of your clients needs some of this today, or maybe some of it next week. So that's what I would do. Own a little bit of this yourself. Try these moves yourself. If you don't find a weak quadrant, you're not looking hard enough, because every one of us has one. If you're over 20, you've got enough baggage to make you have a weak quadrant. You just hadn't found it yet. So find it in you, find it in a partner, and then go find it in your clients and patients, and they'll thank you.
Thanks again, Gray. What a truly insightful little session that we had right there, and we can't wait to do another one with you. Now, I know a lot of people are asking resources for this. Our team will send out some resources just to guide you into some more information about unlocking that chop and the lift. We do have some online courses at functionalmovement.com. We have an exercise tubing as well as a cable bar course that really dive a little bit into that chop and that lift and just some options for those, as well as Lee Burton did a YouTube segment on the chop and the lift. So again, we'll send those resources out to you. But we appreciate that you took time out of your day to be here with us and to ask such great questions. We love that interaction with everybody out there. And until next time, everybody, move well, move often, and keep making that change. Keep helping people move better. We'll see you again soon.